Welcome to What She Does, the podcast that takes you inside the working lives of everyday women shaping the world around us. I'm Leanne Starr.
And I'm Annie Sinzinger. And each week, we sit down with someone who shows us not just what she does, but how and why she does it. Plus, find out if you fit the same mold to grab the same type of gig. Let's discover
What She Does, starting now.
There's a category of legal work that doesn't get much attention, representing the people on the other side of abuse. Not prosecuting on behalf of the state, but standing directly beside the survivor. That's exactly what today's guest built her career around. After years in big law, prosecution, and civil rights litigation, she founded ALM Law to do just that.
Today we have Allison Mahoney, who is a domestic violence lawyer. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and to chat with both of you.
Yes, we have so many questions. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got into this legal practice and why you have focused on this?
Sure. When I was in law school, I really wanted to work on social justice issues. Criminal law is what I thought that I was going to end up doing. And I wanted to be a trial lawyer. And so afterwards, I went to a big law firm and then was a prosecutor in New York for a couple of years. I worked on sex crimes, an organized crimes bureau, which investigated things like sex trafficking and political corruption, that sort of stuff. And from there, I really wanted to find a way to represent victims directly rather than working for the government. Luckily, I was in New York City. It's where I am right now. And New York has a ton of nonprofits and specialty law firms that focus on like narrow categories of victims' rights issues. And so I was looking at either going to an organization that worked with survivors of trafficking, of domestic violence, or kids who had been abused. And I ended up going the direction of working with kids and eventually started specializing on cases involving child sexual abuse and exploitation. The vast majority were in the foster care system in New York City. So my clients were the kids. And then from there, I was seeing the same issues pop up over and over and over again in family court in New York. And I, at the same time, wanted to expand my practice out of litigating just in family court. And so I joined a civil rights firm in New York that investigated foster care systems all over the country and filed federal class actions on behalf of children in foster care systems to force broken foster care systems to reform and improve. And those cases were really, really fascinating. They were like very political. There was a large investigatory stage at the beginning of cases, and I loved it. And then the pandemic hit. And during that time, I was in New York, and in about August of 2020, I started to question whether I wanted to stay in New York for the rest of the pandemic. I was thinking it would just be a short-term thing. And so I ended up going to Colorado. It was supposed to be 3 months. Now it's been 5.5 years of primarily being in Colorado. I still spend time in New York. And while I was there, I decided to start my own firm. I wanted to work at a private law firm that represented people who had been abused, and I was having a hard time finding a firm that did exactly what I wanted to do. And so I created it. And so we work with survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual abuse, cyber abuse, and then we do civil rights cases for kids who have been abused in foster care and juvenile justice systems. That's a little long-winded, but that's the journey.
This all sounds incredibly rewarding, but I would think this would take a real toll on you as a lawyer. Can you talk a little bit about, I don't know how you balance this.
Yeah,
I really
it's
don't.
hard. It's hard. And I mean, just to be completely honest, the work can be hard. The work is definitely rewarding, and everyone's different, but I'm the type of person where I need to be doing something very purpose driven. It motivates me and I enjoy working on these cases, but it am exposed to a lot of secondary trauma. And then running and growing a law firm is like a job in and of itself. And so right now I have, it feels like 7 different jobs that I'm I'm doing at the same time. But the way I balance it is through self-care. I do a lot of yoga, I meditate. Part of what I love about being in Colorado is I spend a lot of time outdoors. So in the
Mm,
summer and fall, I hike. In the winters, I ski. I have strict boundaries with
mm.
clients around when the office is open and accepting calls and text messages because I will burn out, and the other people who are working with me will also burn out if we're on call 24/7 given the type of work that we do. So those are some of the ways, among
Okay,
others.
skiing and hiking, but it
Right.
still seems like a lot,
Yeah.
to be honest. Can you talk a little bit about how is it different being an independent prosecutor and then what you're having to do to build your own law firm?
So when you're a prosecutor, you work for a government, like you're a government employee, but you're representing the people, right? So even if you have a case that involves sexual assault, we weren't representing the victim. We were representing the people of, whichever county
Hmm.
we were operating in. And I mean, being a prosecutor in many ways is like other jobs where you have a boss. The offices I was in were very large. And so there were a lot of different layers. Having my own firm, I mean, I had to build it from scratch and I'm still building. Like, I think it's going to be a continuous journey, but I've had to learn about how to build a business, different pieces of a business, like managing all of the financials, the marketing, the sale, like there's all of these different components of it. And luckily I found that I really like all of that. I think it's interesting, but I've had to develop a whole separate skill set that I didn't have graduating from law school.
And what was the skill set specifically?
So when I started my law firm, before I had any clients, I joined a program that's basically like a boot camp and training ground for people who are starting law firms. And that gave me a lot of structure. But I mean, I learned about the financials that I need to be tracking every week, creating a budget, having a P&L, all of those different things. I had to build out systems, which is very much still a work in progress, like our case management system, our marketing systems, policies internally, external policies. I've had to learn a lot about marketing and PR, managing people. And then I think anyone who's started a business, there's so much mindset work also that you have to constantly be doing. And luckily I'm someone who like likes mindset work. And so I enjoy that piece of it, but there's a lot of different pieces.
Was there any hesitation on your part before you dived into this particular area to do this?
I think my only hesitation, it wasn't about the area of law, it was more about starting my own firm
Mm.
because I think it's natural to have a little bit of imposter syndrome, or I started and was like, "Well, are people gonna hire me, or are they gonna just go to a larger firm that's been in existence for a while? Like, why would they hire someone who is just starting a firm?" And what I learned is that if someone specializes and can give a lot of attention to a case and add value, it doesn't really matter if you're just starting out. But in terms of the practice areas, no, I didn't question that. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I think it would have been easy enough if I had wanted to do like business litigation or something like that, to just find a job at a law firm and transition into that. I don't mean to put down lawyers by any means who do that work. But for me, that just wasn't what was catching my interest.
Allison, I realize that the topic that you touch is very sensitive. You talked a little bit about building the business and getting clients who experience these different things. What do you think those clients are really looking for in the type of lawyer? What do you bring to that would make them choose you over, let's say, some big firm?
Yeah. Um, I think one is being trauma informed and understanding the impact that trauma can have on people. When I was the job right after I was a prosecutor, we had social workers who worked in our office. We were pretty evenly split between lawyers and social workers. And so the majority of my interviews with my clients, a social worker was present. And I got to learn from them about different interviewing techniques and whatnot in terms of how to talk to young people who had experienced a tremendous amount of trauma on top of a bunch of other trainings over the years. So that's one piece of it. And then I think another huge piece of it is focusing on a very narrow category of cases and being able to say that's all we do. There's a lot of firms out there that, they are like general personal injury firms and they handle car accidents and things like that. And then they also take the occasional sexual assault case. And I think it adds a lot of value to clients to be able to say, we don't represent people who abuse. We're not defense attorneys. We don't do those other areas of litigation. We don't practice in those other areas, other personal injury areas. We only do this.
So, given all of the things that you've been able to accomplish, is there a particular highlight moment of your career so far?
Uh, the highlight of my career. I'm sure there are many others, but what's one of the first things that's coming to mind is at my last job at A Better Childhood
Mhm.
was going through my first investigation, like building an investigation and building a case and seeing it turn into a class action on behalf of thousands of children.
Oh, that would be a good payoff.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would think
thousands. It and the media attention and everything that comes along with it, it really it shines a light on a problematic system, and I
Mm.
think gave a voice to a lot of people who had experienced a lot of wrongdoing over the years.
Is there something that people would not know that you have to do or that's unexpected about your job?
I think that a lot of clients don't necessarily know the amount of work that has to be put
Mhm.
into a case, especially if it's a case that we're doing on a contingent fee, so they're not, we get paid at the end, but that's also part of our job is to not be telling them like, "Oh, all of these things are happening and we're dealing with this, like, constant chaos." Like, we shield them from that. I usually tell people that part of my job is to help take some of the stress
Hmm.
off of their plates.
Mm.
So that's one thing. But I think something else that I would note is we do a lot of tech abuse cases.
Mm.
So,
Oh,
like image-based sexual abuse, which is revenge porn, deepfakes, sex
Wow.
tortion cases. We handle a lot of those, and I feel like it's just, like, increasing by the week, the number of calls that we get about those,
good.
and our work on that, it ranges from litigation to doing a bunch of work outside of court, like helping to get content removed from the internet, and preserving evidence, working with law enforcement, that sort of thing.
I'm
Wow. I mean,
I'm
I'm just
thinking about you have to have such an understanding of AI at this point, which is not what I would have expected.
You know, I think that is, like, a little bit of a misconception about lawyers in this space. So, yes, I do need to know about the different forms of technology and platforms and ways that people are perpetrating abuse, but I don't necessarily need to be a tech expert. There's people that we hire, like there's a private investigator firm who I love in Chicago, and we work regularly with them to help identify where content is. They can do like dark web searches, they have a whole skill set that's outside of what we do. We need to be tapped into the right resources
Right.
to be able to handle those cases.
You're very passionate about this topic. Is there an influence in particular that led you to choose this path?
Um, not one thing. I mean, as a kid, my parents always really encouraged us to volunteer and give back. That was instilled in myself, my brother, my sister. It was something that had always been emphasized, and so from the time that we were young through college, I had done different volunteer activities and whatnot, and then it was interesting when I started working with kids in foster care, it kind of came full circle in some ways. My grandmother on my dad's side had grown up in the foster care, or she spent the early years of her childhood in the foster care system
Mhm.
in Illinois, and my aunt was a foster parent, another aunt was a nurse in the system, and so I had also, like, been somewhat aware of the complications with foster care systems because of my family's experience in it. And then I think the other thing that I would add is that I was in a relationship that was pretty traumatic. And
Mhm.
so that has also like deepened me in ways and caused me to be more passionate about this.
Clearly, with AI, obviously there's AI that's on the perpetrating side where they utilize and you have to be aware of that. How how did how does a lawyer now use AI, or how does AI impact you as a lawyer that's not necessarily in the cases that you're finding, but
Mhm.
even in your everyday work? Like, do
Yeah,
you see that starting to creep in since that's such a hot topic right now?
absolutely. And I think that it's important for lawyers to be, to the extent they can, to be exploring how to use it to benefit their firms. It's something that my team has talked about, and I think I know we're gonna continue exploring ways that AI can help to enhance how our firm operates. But the ways we use it, it ranges from things like I use ChatGPT to help come up with marketing plans and, things like that to create policies. We have used AI platforms, especially in cases where I've co-counseled with other firms to help review discovery and analyze
Mhm.
motions and things like that. And lawyers have to be careful about which AI platforms they're using for what. You can't put sensitive or confidential information into an open platform like ChatGPT or Claude. It has to be a closed system that's
Mhm.
not
Oh,
you know, potentially releasing what you're inputting or learning from it to help other people. But when you have a case with thousands and thousands of pages of discovery, it can be really, really helpful. Something that would take an attorney days, it can do in like a minute.
Makes your job a lot easier and a lot more efficient, I see.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I think, like, with all there's so many options out there in terms of, like, different forms of technology that can help businesses, and I think AI is kind of the same where it's like, you have to figure out what's right and what's actually gonna be helpful, and it's evolving so quickly, so we're still playing around with all of that. I know I get marketing calls from companies that have, like, AI answering services and things like that. The ones that I've tested out, I haven't liked, and with what people are calling our firm about, we
yeah.
have to be careful
Yes.
about making sure that they're sensitive.
Yeah. I would
How
I would think that would be difficult to slap AI
Uh-huh.
into your thing. I was thinking, "Oh, she's SVU. She's, on TV as Mariska Hargitay." Um, how off base is the television portrayal? Um, and, like, there's so many series now that have tackled what you're doing and what you're in. How off base is it? And is it useful or is it detrimental?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I used to watch SVU all the time.
Mhm.
And it's like a big fan, and then when I was in law school, we had a class that we had to take. I think it was required. I went to law school in New York where we had SVU actors come in and play, like, potential clients, and you would interview them and, go through a whole thing. But, so I think it's good in terms of raising awareness about, different things that are happening. My understanding is that a lot of the SVU stories, not all of them, but are inspired by
Yeah.
real cases. What is not helpful is jurors and, like, lawyers talk about this a lot, especially prosecutors. Jurors expect there to be evidence like there is on SVU in cases, especially cases involving sexual assault, and that's just not the reality. Usually, there's not DNA evidence. What's happening happens behind closed doors. There's not witnesses, and so the bar feels higher than it should be because that's a jury's impression of what the type of information they should be getting.
And one of the things I've heard in California, they lifted the 7-year ban. There's a really good chance if you even had a rape kit done, that might have been thrown out. So, is that one thing that people are unaware of?
Yeah, I mean, so, a lot of jurisdictions opened what's called look back windows up, where they said you have a year if your statute of limitations has expired already to
Yeah.
file a case. From what I know, most of them have been civil rather than criminal. It's possible, I guess, that prosecutors could prosecute old cases, but the ones I'm familiar with are civil cases. So the victim has a chance to file a lawsuit when they hadn't been, and then statute of limitations are being expanded or removed for certain types of cases. If it happened a long time ago, it's tough in terms of evidence. I mean, someone's testimony is evidence. A lot of the, like, clergy abuse cases
Oh,
happened a long, long time ago,
yeah.
but there could be records that the church has. You have witness testimony, maybe they told someone else, that person can then be a witness. So I think those cases, they just take a lot of investigation and evidence gathering before before you can decide whether to move forward or not.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of work that
Yeah,
has to take place. And
yeah.
again, like people don't realize what lawyers have to do.
Mhm,
How
mhm.
long do cases typically take in this particular subject field? I mean, you know,
Time.
I imagine long time, but, like, is there, like, an average amount of time that people should expect when they walk into, a firm and say, "I wanna pursue this?"
So it varies because a case can settle at any time.
Mm.
And there's plenty of cases where you can get a settlement before ever having to go to court. So it's possible that it could settle quickly. And then once you file a lawsuit, same thing. It varies on if enough pressure and evidence is gathered early to show the other side that they're at a huge risk, there's a better chance of settling. But some, even if you have great evidence, you end up litigating all the way to trial or the brink of trial. I mean, I have a case right now that we filed, I think it was 2 years ago, and
Oh,
Oh, wow.
it's set for trial in November.
yike.
So, it varies, but I think a normal expectation would be that it would be like a year or 2. A year would be pretty quick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That
It's
still
still
seems like
a long
yeah.
time to be worrying about what's happening next.
Yeah. Yeah. which is also why it's so important for the lawyer to make sure that the client is the right fit for the firm and for the
Mm.
client to make sure that the lawyer is the right fit for
Mm.
them because you're in it for the long haul,
Yeah,
potentially.
True. True.
um, and working with kids, I think, would be even harder,
I love
correct?
working with kids. Yeah. When we represent kids, a lot of my interactions are with the parents.
Mm.
Mhm.
But, working on cases involving kids, I think is so, so rewarding.
Oh, that's good.
I'm just kind of curious what you would tell your younger self knowing all this stuff you know now.
Mhm. I think, I think I would tell myself that taking risks is a good thing as lawyers are very risk averse.
Mhm.
And even if you were someone who is willing to take risks earlier, law school knocks a lot of that out of you, it's like there's a set way to do things, there's a set path, and if you veer off of that, your life is over because you're not following the protocol, but I think that taking risks and accepting that things may not always fall into place and that it'll be fine and that you just need to learn to pivot is is a very important thing to understand.
And
Oh, that's
looking forward, what do you think are going to be some of the major legal trends in your specialized field in the next few years?
I think that tech abuse is
good.
going to infiltrate, like, most of the practice areas that we're working in. I mean, domestic violence is a good example. So many of those cases now also involve tech abuse,
Mm.
uh, and that area is evolving so quickly as the technology evolves, and so I think that's one area. I'm very interested to see what happens in being able to hold tech companies and platforms accountable.
Yes.
Well, yeah, people have largely been barred from doing that by a statute called Section 230, but there have been cases they've been in the news recently,
Which
um,
one?
about, like, social media addiction
Mhm.
cases and the negative impact on mental health, and those are really structured as products liability cases, but, um, it's certainly making a dent and an impact, and I think I don't know, I would love to see legislation that would allow people to hold the tech platforms accountable for misconduct that's happening on those platforms.
And
And
why hasn't that happened yet?
because that law that I
What
mentioned, and
law?
I think there's some pretty powerful lobbying
Ugh.
happening behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah.
My last question for you honestly is what would you tell up and coming young lawyers who are looking to pursue your field how to stay abreast of what's happening and also specifically for the topics you cover?
Mhm. Um, I think so law schools offer a lot of programming around this, like lawyer or law students can participate in clinics that specialize on different areas of law. Like I did a federal litigation clinic and had a civil rights case, and so they can do things like that. And then they're working with a professor who is really passionate about whatever that practice area is, continuing education.
Mm.
There's also different lawyer groups and different media platforms. Like if you want to learn about foster care, there's a media platform called The Imprint that has a ton of helpful information. There's conferences. I go to a conference most summers hosted by APSAC. They changed their name. I don't remember exactly what the new name is, but it was the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, I think was the acronym, and it all related to issues with kids. So whether it was tech abuse, child abuse, foster care, I feel like we're living in a time where there are so many resources out there, and if you don't know, then connect with lawyers who work in this space and ask them what they're going to, what they're reading, to get guidance on that.
I'm glad you're fighting the good fight. We're both moms of girls. Oh, the AI stuff is terrifying, and I'm glad you're out there. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much,
much.
Allison Mahoney.
It was really great to talk to you. Thank you so much for telling your story.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, I'm so impressed with her, but I would not want to do her job
I think,
for love or money.
yeah, Allison, I thought she was really calm,
Yeah,
very clear about her kind of focus and also sort of her drive why she wants to do the work she does. I mean,
which I think is necessary. You would have to have a really clear idea of why you're doing it because it'd be really traumatic otherwise.
I think hearing lots of stories about anybody's type of abuse, and in particular hers being domestic and child related abuse, it can really take a toll on your emotional state too.
Yeah, and the
Eh
fact that she's so calm and level,
Yes.
initially I was like, "But you need to be fiery in the courtroom." No, she's dealing with people who are survivors of abuse. Being calm and level is a skill set that you would need.
Yeah. What I didn't, know and or didn't really think about is how much she also kind of has to deal with things like cyber abuse. Like,
Yeah,
we know about social media cyberbullying,
yeah,
but there's so much more and deeper, in terms of, like, offenses that happen
yeah,
that I thought, "Wow," I would have never thought of those things utilizing the tools, but people do nefarious things with these
mhm,
tools,
yep,
and any type of new technology seems to have, like, its good parts and its bad parts, and so we need people like her to kind of fight for people to protect them from
yeah,
people doing the bad things. So, like, I'm so impressed actually by the work she's doing.
mhm.
Um, I thought it was interesting we talked a little about SVU and sort of like the kind
Yeah,
of that I mean, because that's my I don't know about you, but that's sort of also
the viewpoint.
my,
Yeah,
perspective is having watched that show and knowing that these things exist, and obviously, it's all dramatic and stuff, but at least it raises the profile of these things happening and that
mhm.
people should be aware of them, but don't take, like, the show as gospel, if you
Yes.
will.
It's like a 50-50 split. It's like, yes, it's useful to have a television show that teaches you.
Mhm.
However, they do not solve crimes the way they do on TV
Right,
that quickly.
right.
So, um, I can see it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Obviously, she has a law degree, so if you're gonna go into this, you need to not only have your bachelor's degree, but you have to go to law school, you also have to get state license. I think it's also helpful that and she talked about the fact that she worked with a lot of social workers, and
Mhm.
so, being exposed to this as an assistant DA, you're also supporting criminal investigations, but then she doesn't do criminal anymore because she has a private practice, so
Right.
her private practice is more on civil cases, so I think understanding the fact that there are different ways to approach it. So you could go into this particular topic as a lawyer, but you can do it either for the public in criminal cases or you can do it what Allison's doing, which is private practice and helping civil cases. So think making it clear that there are a couple paths for people to take if they wanted to do this.
Yeah.
Salary's good.
Salary is very good.
So
And
on
I would
average
expect it to be good for what you have to listen to and what you have to
Yeah,
deal with.
that's true, and the outlook is good too, though. I don't know if that's a good thing that it's
Yeah, I
growing,
don't
but it's growing. So anybody who's coming out of law school could tackle these if they have the right kind of disposition
Yes.
and motivation
And
because
they can deal with a lot of traumatic stress.
yes. So purpose driven is gonna be really, really important. And I think the biggest thing that I sort of thought about was how much her own story influenced her work.
Yeah.
So, like, that just speaks again to the idea that you have to be really purpose driven to kind
Yeah.
of follow this path, but
Yeah.
very worthwhile in the end.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us today. That's what she does, and maybe what you could do too. If you like what you heard, make sure you follow What She Does wherever you get your podcasts.